Now we are going to have our closing plenary, Sustaining Momentum, Mobilizing Action. And Victor Vieira from the Instituto Talanoa will be moderating this phenomenal session. And I'm going to call him up on the stage. Can we give him a nice warm hand of applause?
How are you today? Yeah, doing great. That's nice. But, well, as you may already know, climate action cannot be tackled alone, so I will be already inviting our speakers to join me in this much-needed panel. First, please, Marco Lambertini, the convener for Nature Positive Initiative. Let's give him. And Rebecca Mikula-Wright, CEO for the Asian Investor and Investor Group on Climate Change. And Ricardo Assumpção, the ESG and Sustainability Head Lead for Latin America for EY. Nili Gilbert, Vice Chairwoman for Carbon Direct. And Anna Cabral Gardner, Co-CEO for Sigma Lithium. Well, as COP begins, what we are seeing here in Belém is unprecedented levels of both cooperation and climate ambition being disposed both in the negotiation tracks and in the outside world, in the business world. So, but what matters here is not as much at what else needs to be done, but what will last. And how can we protect these climate pledges from both political cycles and business cycles? But, well, as you may know, we could not start a panel in the Amazon without mentioning nature, of course. So first, let's please take a look at this film trailer brought by Nature Positive, please.
Nature. It gives us everything we need to thrive. And it is our greatest ally in the fight against climate change. Becoming nature positive is our pathway to a safe and prosperous future.
The only way we can build a people positive future is to secure a nature positive one.
Yet we are destroying nature faster than at any other time in our history. And the effects on humanity are profound.
Humanity has become a weapon of mass extinction. And ultimately, we are committing suicide by proxy.
Our assault on nature threatens the foundations of our future.
We cannot continue to grow, consume, and not expect any consequences.
All the science we have today shows that we are in danger, but we have not yet lost it. The window is still open to turn back.
We are facing the greatest choice in the history of our species. Continue with business as usual and put the future of humanity at risk. Or transition our societies, our economies, and our future to a nature-positive path.
We have created these systems, and that means that we can change them.
Nature positive is not a vision. It's something that we have to do.
We are the ones who hold the pen and can write the next chapter in the history of humanity.
Can we build a better future where both nature and humanity thrive? This is the promise of a nature-positive world.
Wow. Thank you, Marco, for starting us off really well, really strongly, I'd say. But so, as we've seen in this film trailer, there is a clear interconnection between the nature, our economies, and overall humanity. But somehow, nature issues are still seen as very impractical, very perhaps fragmented, very complex. So from your perspective, Marco, how could we translate these interconnections into coherent actions at scale, please?
Thank you. Thank you so much also for allowing us to show the trailer. And we really strongly invite you to see the whole film and receive your feedback. Look, we're really living an interesting time in the evolution of our species because for 99.99% of our life history, we've been living deep in nature and depending directly from nature as well. And in the last few centuries, particularly the last few decades, I have to say, we have taken this trajectory of exponential growth, economic, technological, demographic, which on one hand has delivered a lot of good for humanity. And if you look at, and we should remember that, because if you look at the human development indicators of just 100 years ago, at the start of the 20th century, I mean, extreme poverty was 2/3 of the population, malnutrition almost the same, child mortality was super high, extreme life expectancy was almost below 40 and now is almost 80. So a lot has improved. But unfortunately, has all happened in a way that has damaged the very foundation of that development, which is the resources, the services that nature has provided to us. And so we have ignored that because nature has been so rich and so powerful and so resilient for so long. But now that we have this immense, unprecedented impact of the natural system on the Earth systems, we've got to rethink our development model. Not only for nature itself, which is what many of us care about as, emotionally for their intrinsic value, but also in the interest of our own next development phase. And that's what really needs to happen. I have to say, before anything else, what needs to happen is a mindset shift where we should stop taking nature for granted, understand and listen to science in terms of the impact we are having, but particularly the consequences that those impacts are beginning to generate for our own economy, stability and resilience, for our own health, for our own well-being overall. Nature loss, climate change are not any longer an ethical issue like they were considered just a few decades ago. They're actually a security issue for humanity, and that changes completely everything. Now, that awareness is happening. We are the most environmentally aware generation of all time. But we haven't yet agreed and found the ways to translate the new emerging awareness in actually aligned, concerted, coordinated, at scale, fast action. And that's where we need to focus on, providing tools to the various sectors in society, particularly to the private sector, business and financial institutions, who are today the cause of the majority of the impacts, together, of course, with us consumers, and provide them the clarity and the guidance to really develop plans, redirect financial flows that will help transition from the nature negative economy of today that has done its time, to the new nature positive economy that will actually continue to help us and allow us to develop sustainably and perhaps even more equitably than we have done until now.
Wow. Well, that's very nice to hear because I do working on climate change for as long as I have worked, it's really odd when people come across with a doom framing. I do like your perspective on how we are already the most nature-aware generation. So, and now I want to bring to you, Ricardo, regarding perhaps businesses and business governance, how would you say, from your perspective, that this meaningful governance and perhaps reporting can help address the issue of what Marco just said? How can this mind shift towards a nature-positive economy be secured in the boardrooms, even with changes in the economic perspectives?
So, Caio, thank you very much. I completely agree with Marco. It's about mind shifting. So we need to change the way that we think. First, we need to understand that climate is not a project. Climate is about risk management and corporate opportunity. So just to set the scene. And when the board treats the theme like this way, it keeps on the agenda even in down cycle moment with huge economic pressure. This is important. But why does it matter now? Because climate, it is a financial issue to the board. So to set the scene, today regulations are coming, as we know. 57% of the global GDP, with more than 40% of the market cap globally, is already regulated by ISSB, S1 and S2, or any other regulation, any kind of regulation. And we have a survey that is called CEO Pulse at EY that shows that 95% of all the CEOs has the intention to keep or accelerate transformation, but just on those companies that has sustainability integrated in their corporate strategy. So this is important. When we see climate as a compliance, or just as compliance, it disappears in the first down cycle. That's the truth, and we know that. But when climate is seen as something linked to value creation, it keeps, doesn't matter what is happening, doesn't matter all the geopolitics, it keeps on the board, it keeps on the conversation, because it is related on how we protect our firms. But you mentioned meaningful governance. I have 3 points here that I want to mention. First, responsibility on the board must be clear, and the board must have technical expertise on climate. This is the first thing. This is mandatory. Boards that perform better, they treat climate as part of the strategy, and they have climate inside their matrix, the risk matrix. So this is the truth. And we have another survey that shows that board that work better with sustainability, they achieve higher levels of innovation. So the conclusion is, when you have a robust agenda on sustainability integrated in your corporate strategy, you can achieve more innovation. That's the main takeaway when you do the right job. And you need the mind shift to do that. The second point that I just want to mention here is we need to connect climate strategy with CapEx and incentives. And we know probably 6% of the market treats sustainability just as regulation. So they don't know exactly how to build the bridge between compliance and transformation. This is the first point. And when they do that, they are not sure how to finish all the initiatives related with climate. This is important. So more than half of all the initiatives stop in the beginning. They announce that, and then they stop it. We know that is almost greenwashing. And just going to the end here, maybe 3 points that we need to pay attention. First, we need to treat regulation as the floor, not as the ceiling. Big compliance is not everything. It's a risk. When you think that you are compliant and you can stop, you are at risk. So this is the first point. Second, investors, they are evaluating the quality of ESG linked with the quality of the management of the company. So they understand when you treat your sustainability data as you treat your financial data, probably you have a much better management on your company. Second, we need to equip our boards to make the right questions, okay? For example, for me, the best questions for the boards, you have to say, are we evaluating investment in sustainability with the same rules that we evaluate any other CapEx? And probably we need to understand that today sustainability will affect not the short term, but the medium and the long term. So companies that don't have the board, the expertise of sustainability, of climate at the board, and integrate it in their risk matrix, probably they'll lose competition in the medium term once the cost of the extreme events it's getting higher. Last year was around $750 billion. And probably in most of the public companies, there is no P&L for that. That's it, I'll pause here.
Wow. Thank you, Ricardo. I think you gave us a nice overview, especially about the risks. And not only that, but how could we, well, bring meaningful governance, I'd say, more not only in the short term, but in a longer perspective. But decarbonization pathways are not only about carbon, actually, right? They're also about people and perhaps equity. So on the matter, I would like to invite you, Nili, Gilbert, to give us an overview on your perspective on perhaps given that climate action is actually urgent and extremely popular, we are still seeing some kind of backlash from, well, the overall audience and the overall population. And I do think this has to do because of a lack of a justice-driven process, equity-driven process. So on your perspective, what kind of perhaps finance models or carbon management, I'd say, well, carbon management solutions, I'd say, will help ensure that these decarbonization pathways are not only sustainable, but also equitable?
Thank you for this question. I think it's such an important topic, and thank you to World Climate Summit and World Climate Foundation for hosting us. So as you mentioned, I'm the vice chairwoman of Carbon Direct, and you can hear it in the name. Of course, we think a lot about carbon, but our work combines a great team. If you remember anything about Carbon Direct, have it be our science team, which is about 90 people, over 70 PhDs on staff. But we combine carbon science, also with nature science, and social scientists on the team. And I think as we move forward, whichever lane that you're in, it's so important that all of us have more intersectional thinking about how we move forward. I always say, some people say solving climate change is the hardest problem that humanity has ever faced. I like to say solving climate change in a way that also addresses our long-standing social goals and ecological goals is the hardest challenge that we've ever faced. So, and then when you think about the application to finance, you're adding yet another layer of deeply analytical and methodological process and application. So the way that we do this is Carbon Direct is actually two separate businesses. On the one side, you have, I told you about the science team, our client-facing scientific advisory business. that partners with governments, companies, foundations, and others on their decarbonization journeys. On the other side of the business, you have our capital management business, Carbon Direct Capital, that invests in technologies for industrial decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors. Also a lot right now on data center decarbonization. And then we also invest in nature-based solutions projects. And the advisory business has lots of clients, but one of the clients is the asset management business. So this way, we're able to bring diverse perspectives into the question of how best to allocate capital into areas that have traditionally been harder to finance. One of the reasons that they're hard to finance is just greater complexity. The financial ecosystem is by now pretty good at financing solar panels and EVs, not as good at financing nature or hard-to-abate sector solutions. So when you think about this question of how do finance, science, nature, and society equity goals come together, some of it comes from just building diverse teams. And as I said, some of it comes from all of us owning a diverse set of opportunities. And this is really important also because when we look at what the finance sector is saying about what it's going to take for us to move more capital, everyone's saying we're moving, but we're not moving fast enough, we're not moving at scale. One of the things that we need is a better enabling environment, a better ecosystem with the right policies, regulatory frameworks, governance frameworks to be able to move this capital forward, but we need to assert that those frameworks should also be intersectional. That if you're looking at protocols about greenhouse gas, that they also include broader issues. And that's something that we have been calling for in our policy engagement. I'm sorry that I have a hard stop I have to get back, but thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Thank you for joining us, Gilbert. And well, Nili Gilbert told us about intersectionality and perhaps collaboration. And well, as you know, we sit here in Belém because of a COP cycle. But no country can, well, achieve its climate pledges without thinking about capital, without thinking about investors. So, Rebecca, welcome to our panel.
Thank you.
From your perspective, what roles can network as the IGCC and AIGCC play to preserve that accountability and perhaps deliver can be reached throughout COP cycles? And indeed, what would you think that the investors community would want from COP31 next year?
Well, that's two big questions there. So I guess from the experience with the Investor Group on Climate Change, which covers Australia and New Zealand, and the Asia Investor Group on Climate Change, our work covers sort of three strategic levers. The work we do with investors through their portfolios to understand the risks and opportunities of climate, how they work with their investee companies, what they're asking of them, board governance, remuneration, CapEx, all the detail in how the companies are transitioning, but also how they're engaging with policymakers and regulators around the region in which we operate, and investors do this globally as well. And so the way we're looking at COP31, for example, Australia has the bid in Adelaide for next year, is really as bringing these three strategic levers that we have across the two different networks that sort of service different groups of investors in different markets. But we look at the key trading flows that operate between, for example, Australia and the Asia Pacific, how Australia is the major trading partner, sending iron ore to China, Korea, Japan, sending a lot of our materials, particularly to our major Asian trading partners. And so we're looking at how the demand and supply across those regional and global supply chains is working. And the opportunity of having a COP in Australia is an accelerant to that process. We'll be doing this work anyway. This work needs to happen. This is part of the transition that we need to go through. But we see this as a massive opportunity for Australia, for example, to be a decarbonising force for the region. But the region wants this in Australia as well. We haven't had a COP in the Pacific since 2007 in Bali. We had a global press conference this morning saying we want the COP in Australia, we want to get that decision. It's imminent, it'll happen by the end of this COP or before with any luck, because it is such a massive opportunity. And we were all talking, all this week and next week about how do we accelerate the pace, how do we scale up capital, how do we do this? Well, COP is the best way, really, one of the best ways, the biggest event in the world to bring people together to really figure out how to do that, and for companies, investors to talk together. Everyone's having meetings, running around different places in Belém, trying to meet up, trying to do deals, trying to move capital. How do we do this? Address the challenges. So yeah, just it acts as that leverage point. And for us, we work with our global investor networks, North America, Europe, sort of the global groups. We have global groups that focus on policy. We've been doing joint policy advocacy and engagement, asking global governments as part of the COP process for, I think, about 15 years now, saying here's the shopping list of policy and regulatory change that global investors need to see to drive capital into the transition. And so we use this opportunity to convene our global investor partners at events like this. We had a joint event in Sao Paulo last week where we all come together and say, right, here's what we need from policy, here are the gaps, here's what investors are doing. And we launched a global investor survey last week in Sao Paulo, demonstrating, it's under the investor agenda, it's on all of our respective investor network websites, demonstrating the progress that investors are making in their portfolios with their investee companies, how they're thinking and acting and how they're directing their capital towards the transition all over the world, and then what are those sort of policy gaps. So that's what we did this year. So there's a number of different ways we sort of take our market level work and how we deal with that, but then we coordinate and collaborate with our global investor partners as well. And I guess just finally, I think, in the Australian market, for example, with the COP31 next year, what that looks like from a policy engagement perspective is it's one of several things that we talk to the government about across all ministries. We're talking to the Treasury, we're talking to the Department of Climate Change, Energy and Water, we're talking to Finance Ministry, all across the ministry, saying we want to see a coordinated approach for COP, but actually just your approach for Australia and Australian policy in general, because that's what's going to get capital to flow. So just sending that very consistent message. We advocate for the 2035 target, the sector plans, the national adaptation plans, national climate risk assessments, and then we're doing all that work to say to the government, okay, you've got a target, great. What does investing in that target look like? What does that resilient, just, nationally determined contribution look like? Because that's what we need to see. Great policy frameworks you've got there. Let's work on the detail. Let's work on how that's actually going to get implemented. So that's what we've been doing in the Australian context, and then using that COP31 bid for next year, saying this is a way to accelerate this for Australia, but actually the region benefits and in fact, the globe benefits from having that type of conversation. So a few different ways that we sort of approach the event next year, hopefully in Adelaide, but how we, investors are approaching the policy piece and our work in general as well.
Wow, thank you very much. So, mind and economic shift, meaningful governance, COP processes, transitions, political messages. And what we are seeing right now is a political push in Brazil for perhaps a roadmap away from fossil fuels. Minister Marina has stated that a lot of deliberation is going on in the COP venue, so I would like to perhaps bring a resource provider perception. So, Anna, from your perspective, how could the resource providers ensure that this transition away, this energy transition towards a clean energy world, could ensure that it would be more a sustainable long-term goal rather than a short-time supply, since it is really heightened in this moment?
Well, that's where the conversations take place in boardrooms today, it becomes a conversation about energy. And energy has taken place on the conversation about climate, but it's the same thing. I mean, we will need a lot of energy as humanity to evolve. And by more energy, I mean all kinds of energy. Now, ideally, the energy should be renewable, because that's how we're going to be able to ensure that we still have a planet. So there has to be an energy transition. So how do we deliver more energy? And it's interesting because more energy for a better future means different things for different parts of the world. For the Northern Hemisphere, it means a lot of energy for the data centers that we discussed because of AI. And this is actually positive because we now have the cash-rich tech companies, which are low capex by nature, which had a pretty straightforward trail to achieving their climate goals, getting involved in the energy transition conversation because they're funding renewable projects in the Northern Hemisphere in order to ensure that their data centers are plugged to clean grids with renewable energy. It's fascinating. In the developing country, well, not Brazil, because we are now at 98% electrification, but take India, you need to provide energy for 1.4 billion people in India. How do you do that in an affordable way? So humanity will need a lot of energy, no matter how you look at it. Global South, developed North. So then sustainability becomes a conversation about energy. And energy means doing more with less, because irrespectively, it has to be low cost. And this is the conversation. How do you make it low cost? Well, we need to do more with less. So, for instance, at a moment like this, where in boardrooms you need to justify capex for sustainability in hard-to-abate sectors, what we do is, okay, we're building a recycling dry stacking circuit because we're now having a dry stack tailing that we can sell and economically justify it. And therefore, we lower our cost to deliver these materials that will go into the battery storage that enables data centers in the Northern Hemisphere. So everything becomes justified once you show that you connect sustainability with delivering more energy for less, because there's no way around it. It needs to be low cost so that you have higher adoption, so that you increase adoption of what we call renewable energy, or by lowering the cost of renewable energy. What Brazil has done brilliantly, it's 2 cents of a dollar per kilowatt hour here for renewable. It's the second lowest cost of renewable in the world. So widespread adoption of renewable. And then that's how technology gets involved. How did we do this? Deploying technology. And that was the second piece of the CapEx that we also initially justified with climate goals, and now we justify economically. By investing in technology, we lowered the cost of processing in our industry, because we have a mine that's connected to a factory, a plant, a green tech plant, which is the most developed, technologically developed, state-of-the-art lithium processing plant in the world, here in Brazil, in what was the second poorest region of the country. So again, how did we do this? Tech, I mean, I'm a computer engineer, so throwing technology into hard to abate. That plant on its own is almost zero carbon. Why? It's a quintuple zero plant. Again, technology. Quintuple zero, why? Zero tailings. We dry stack, recycle, so no tailings. Zero drinking water, so we use sewage water as source. Zero chemicals, we use accelerated centrifugation. Zero dirty energy, because we get our cheap renewables here in Brazil. And we have zero work accidents. So we operate at the highest standards of Western health and safety. We're we're beating the world record in health and safety in what we call metallurgy and mining. And again, it goes back to, this is sort of how we throw, or we are able to defend in boardrooms to deliver a sustainable company. It is the most sustainable lithium plant in the world. And it's right here in Vale do Jequitinhonha. For those of you who don't know, is one, well, now it's actually growing at 20% a year. But when we got there 12 years ago, it was the second poorest town in this country. Ironically, in the second richest state in a federation, which showed us that we could actually tackle lifting the people of the region by building what we call the state-of-the-art value aggregating industry to the natural resources that the region had. The region was poor because it had absolutely no economic activity.
Well, thank you very, very much, Anna. And just to, well, to wrap it up, as we all have seen, we have touched upon a lot of most important things tonight, this afternoon, which were perhaps the construction of a nature-based and a nature-positive economy, a meaningful governance throughout boardrooms, perhaps the next year COP cycle and the much-needed transition, and also a very nice look in growth, climate-aligned growth in a means to climate-aligned prosperity. So I would like to thank you all for having this moment with us, and let's have our fingers crossed that this moment here in Belém is sustained until next year at least. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Wonderful.